I'm bringing Janet Carlin into the meeting. Okay, we're recording and everybody's in the meeting.
Okay, start with a roll call on President Platt. We have Councilperson Leary, Councilperson Souter, Councilperson Smith, Councilperson Day present, along with the City Administrator, William Barthel, City Solicitor, Dan Lasco, the Building Inspector, Jeff Bergstrom, and our Mayor, Michael Carancho, along with Treasurer Dana Carlin. The reason I called this meeting, and I think it's probably a little bit for Joe Day, but I think it's a good refresher for everyone here, is to maybe have Mr. Lasco go over the rules of the FOIA regulations. We'll go over the code of conduct, or just to discuss the code of conduct, and also that we're still going to continue following the meeting rules under Robert's rules. So, Mr. Lasco, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you, Mr. President. So for purposes of council meetings and like, the big part of FOIA I'd like to run through is the open meetings rules. A large chunk of FOIA deals with document production, what members of the public can request and what they cannot, and how fast we need to produce it. But for council's purposes, the important thing to remember is that any public business must be done in an open setting where all members of the public who want to attend can participate and observe how the sausage is being made, so to speak, how laws are being produced and what the public dialogue is all about. So this comes up in many contexts. You may, especially with emailing, we need to be careful that there's no back and forth dialogue between a quorum of council, 3 or more members, that is discussing public business. It's one thing to send out an email that would go to all members of the council that reports something, for example. That's not in and of itself a violation. Just remember that that email is a producible document under the FOIA law. So whatever you say is available to the public. But what's important about that kind of an email discussion is that you can't prompt any back and forth dialogue, because that would be outside of the public view and a violation of FOIA. Similar to that is an arrangement where council members speak to one another in a serial fashion. So for example, an email or a call that goes to between 2 council members is not in and of itself a violation. But if you then turn around and call another member or email another member separately, and again, it's just 2, it's not a full quorum, to discuss the same issue, that's called a serial FOIA violation, because again, you're involving a quorum of council in your discussions and your decisions. So generally speaking, whenever you're discussing any kind of public business, you want to do it in the context of an open meeting that's been properly noticed, where the public has the ability to observe, ask questions, and see how business is being conducted. There's a lot more to FOIA, but again, a lot of it deals with document production. So let me just stop there and see if anybody has any questions for me on that little refresher.
Just one thing, Dan, when I was reading the FOIA law, what it specifically seemed to pertain to was items that might come before council. You know, and so, you know, Suzanne and I can get together and discuss Philly's scores and talk about that to Valerie. But these are things, and that's a, you know, kind of a wide example, but they are things that might come before council that we would make decisions on.
That's correct. So for example, let's say everyone's at a Christmas party and you have more than a quorum of council present. It's not a problem to talk about what your families are doing or what trips you're taking, but you need to avoid public business. So anything that might appear before council is you know, whether it's conditions of streets, proposed ordinances, a discussion in general about council business, anything that relates to public business should be kept for council meetings in and of themselves. I'd also like to touch upon executive sessions. We have one scheduled for later tonight. Executive sessions are obviously a private discussion of council. And so that there are specific provisions that permit that, but they're very limited. So typically you would see executive sessions being permitted for discussing labor negotiations, union contracts, litigation, where advice of counsel might be solicited, personnel matters, where either the qualifications of somebody to hold a job or disciplinary matters might be discussed. These are the types of objects or subjects that can be discussed in an executive session. We have to be careful in our agendas to identify exactly what it is we're going to be discussing in executive session. We need to maintain confidentiality of those discussions once we're out of executive session. And I've historically kept the meeting minutes of those, and those too ultimately can become discoverable in a FOIA request once the sensitivity of the executive session subject is no longer relevant or at issue. That's all I have.
Mr. Lesko, I have a question about like the serial phone calls and say emails. Just say if two council people talk to each other about a subject and 3 days later, a third one interjects himself between not with the two, but with one of the two that was in the first conversation. How do you handle something like that?
It's a dangerous topic, I think. And I think that your best practice in those kind of events is to say, just stop the presses. Let's not discuss that here. This is public business. We should be discussing it in a duly noticed meeting and treat it in that fashion.
Okay, and that's only because just say I'm going to use me and Valerie. Valerie and I had the conversation and Russ brings it up, 2 days later on a different note. So the second conversation just doesn't take place.
It shouldn't take place. You know that you were party to that first conversation that's innocent enough and not a violation. And now once somebody else has approached you on the same subject, you're in a danger zone there of violating FOIA. So you want to avoid that.
Any other questions? And the only other thing I'm going to suggest here is that I'm going to have Kim email everybody. We all have a copy of the code of conduct. And I think we all signed it once before with the exception of Joe. But since Joe, myself, and Russ have been reelected, maybe we should just re-sign it one more time and Suzanne and Valerie just review it.
Maybe just send it around all of us to DocuSign.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion to meeting's adjourned. Just wait. We have a few minutes. Wait for our regular schedule.
Yeah.
Okay, we are recording again.
Okay, and you're gonna let the public in?
They are in.
Okay, thank you very much. Call this regular council meeting to order. It's being held electronically via Zoom and audio conference. I'm Council President Platt. Also present is Councilperson Leary, Councilperson Smith, Councilperson Sandra, Councilperson Day, City Administrator Bill Barthel, the Mayor, Mike Carancho, City Solicitor Dan Lasco, Chief of Police Rick McCabe, Building Inspector Jeff Bertram, Peter Haig from DelDOT, and our Treasurer Janet Carlin. First order of business is the minutes from the April 12th, 2021 canvass of the vote meeting that was held on April 13th, 2021, and the minutes from April 13th, 2021 regular meetings. Approval of the minutes, corrections.
Correction to the, I think a correction to the regular minutes on the
Okay.
13th page, 5, under the
Ms. Soto, you're on mute.
Sorry. Page 5, under public comments of Ms. Baldini. The second sentence reads as written, she opined that there was too much signage. Signs were removed in a timely manner and leftover signs created litter throughout the city. I think what Ms. Baldini said is that the signs were not removed in a timely manner.
That is correct.
Yes,
So,
that's right.
so it's just a clerical correction.
There's an extra word in there too.
Yeah, remove bin and just change bin to not. Were not removed in a timely manner.
Motion on the minutes? We have a motion to approve the minutes.
A motion, motion made to approve the minutes with
Okay.
as amended.
We have a second.
Second,
Minutes are approved and seconded.
Take a vote.
Move on to staff reports, report from the treasurer.
Yes, good evening, everyone.
Excuse
This
me,
is
Mr.
the
President, did we
unaudited
take a vote?
treasurer.
Did we take a
Can you
vote
hear
on the
me?
minutes?
Janet, hold on.
I apologize, a little nervous. All in favor of approving the minutes?
aye.
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 Any negatives? Now we'll move on to treasurer's report.
Good evening again. This is the unaudited report, treasurer's report as of April 30th, 2021. The unrestricted funds are $5,606,021.85. Total restricted funds, $448,266.96. Total cash in the accounts, $6,054,288.81. Really, that's all I have to report. We are 10 months into this budget, and there have not been any noticeable changes since last month. We're right on schedule, however.
Okay. Any questions for councils?
Ms. Carlin, this is Councilperson Leary. Just as a reminder, when does the MSC appropriation generally come to us?
Yes, it comes quarterly. As you can see on the your budgeted report, it comes quarterly.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. We're at 75, as you see, we're 75% vested at this point.
Okay.
So we're neither ahead.
And the trustee appropriation is also, it's 75%.
So we're no.
So we're
neither-
right on schedule with that. I mean, that historically doesn't change. So far, anyway, we don't know what's going to happen as we go forward. And I don't know whether Bill wants to mention, but we're going to be starting to talk about the budget for this coming fiscal year, which will start in July. So we'll be scheduling some meetings soon.
Mr. President, if I may, we do anticipate receiving getting the funds from the trustees and from MSC as we normally do on our regularly scheduled basis. And as part of my communications, I will ask council to look at your calendars so we can begin budget meeting discussions.
We're right on schedule and good with everything as it's Carlin. We're right on schedule. Everything looks good without any
Yes.
surprises in the next 2 months.
No surprises that I'm aware of. Whoops.
Mr. President, if I could be indulged for 1 second. Is that all right?
So go ahead.
Yep. So Janet and maybe Bill, both the code violation penalties and the code enforcement cost reimbursement numbers are up substantially. I'm going to hope that that's because there's a larger effort going on that's very broad, or are those very large increases explained by just one or two single events, or is it just an accumulation of many smaller or medium-sized events that have resulted in much greater numbers?
I would just simply say that, oh, go ahead, Janet, go ahead.
That's all right. I was going to say the code violation penalties, yes, that was, it is considerably different, yes. Let's see.
We were very conservative in budgeting unless we changed things in our December meeting. So we should be up based on what happened so far.
I believe the code violation penalties, we had I think, Bill, if you want to jump in here, there was a sheriff's sale that we got some money then. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, I believe that's correct. Let me just see here. Code violations. I'll just comment and just say that, yeah, I mean, I think it's a result of us doing what we normally do, is we're trying, we do this every year, and we're you know, we go after these as best we can, and I think this is a result of those efforts. And we've had sheriff sales where you'll see we're going to get reimbursed for those. I think Furio continues to do a good job. I realize there are properties that, you know, continue to be nuisance properties, but he stays on top of them. And as we've said to council through the years, some of these processes take us time to get to a sheriff sale, to get these things resolved. We had a sheriff sale today, and I'll talk about that in a second, which I think council will be pretty happy about. So it's really just a culmination of all of those efforts coming to fruition, Mr. Mayor, so.
Great. That's what I was
Yes,
hoping.
and code violations and code enforcement reimbursements both were categories or, excuse me, line items that were reduced considerably from last year's, you know, budget. When we did the budget this year, they were two lines that were reduced considerably. The budgeted amount.
We budgeted
So-
very conservatively. So if we're
That's right.
ahead,
That's exactly right.
that's where we've been going in the first half of the year. So
That's
into
correct.
the
And that
third-
also is correct, right?
in the third quarter, we should be ahead again, right?
Well, as a percentage of the budget, you're correct. But as the year, you know, you're correct. As a percentage of the budget, we did budget that rather conservatively. But again, I stand by basically the answer that I just provided, which was we continue to do this and we'll continue to do it. And I think those are, never minding what we budgeted, just as the actual results of what we're getting, I think are, as I said, a result of these efforts.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
As I mentioned last month, it was like 62% of the items of revenue items were lower than 2020's budgeted figures. So you can see that why our percentages are higher than what is usual.
Just want to ask that, are we heading in a direction where we'll have a surplus at the end of the fiscal year?
We hope so.
Okay. All right. Okay.
We're heading in a positive direction. As council, as the majority of council is aware, the majority of council and previous council who is here, of course, now is aware, we've had some significant transfer tax. There were some significant sales, so we had some good hits for transfer tax, that type of thing. So as the treasurer has pointed out consistently, I think it's fair to say we have fared well better than we initially started in a year ago, not knowing. And then, of course, we amended the budget, I guess it was in October, November, to the best we can. So I think all those things taken into consideration. I also think, it's clear that the real estate market was way more significant than we thought it was going to be. And of course, again, there were
Right.
some really significant transfer properties that sold, in the $30 million range and others that afforded us to, even on a normally well-projected year, to, to get, to do much better in regard to those types of revenues.
I think we played it safe and it actually worked in our favor, which was a good thing.
That's correct. That's correct, Mr. President.
Motion for the treasurer's report.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nays? Okay, report from the city administrator and staff.
Okay, again, thank you, Mr. President. I did mention just a few seconds ago that we did have a sheriff sale today, 702 Clark Street. Went to the sale and was purchased by an investor. So, again, those things take a little time. This property I know has been discussed or a center of discussion and concern for council for quite some time. So we're very happy that the property went to sale, and hopefully we'll see some results in terms of the building being renovated and put back to good use. I don't know, is Julie on, Kim? Oh yeah, there she is. I wanted to also mention fireworks. Of course, last month we talked about the firework, still trying to proceed forward with the fireworks for Separation Day. And if you remember, again, the majority of you remember, we talked about reaching out to Colonial School District. We did, Event Allies did, Julie did, and unfortunately they were not interested in allowing us to have that program at William Penn. So I reached out to the trustees in the hopes that we could do it at the farm. And last Tuesday, the trustees didn't think that was such a good idea. So last Wednesday, we were notified that was not going to happen. And as it happens, as my mother always said, things happen for a reason. So soon after I got the notice last Wednesday from the trustees, an email went out from the state that they were amending the fireworks. They were amending the firework restrictions quite considerably. And so we then decided then we regrouped, myself, Event Allies, the chief, and discussed the possibility of going back to Battery Park. So the good news is we've kind of come full circle. We're back to Battery Park, and Julia, I see you're on, so do you want to kind of take it from there?
Sure, thank you.
Mhm.
So we did regroup with the chief and with Bill, and I reached out and had a conversation with Jamie Mack at the Department of Health. And the state is very excited for us to move forward with fireworks. Right now, what we're considering doing is staying with the larger firework cake so that the fireworks will still, as we kind of talked about last month, they'll go up in the air higher. So you can see them from a further distance. The state is just asking that they work directly with us on the language, because we're not holding the parade. There will not be a festival in Battery Park. There will be no food trucks. Saying there's really no reason to fence Battery Park because people can watch the fireworks from lots of different vantage points. They're not coming there to listen to a concert. They're not coming to Battery Park for, food and that type of thing. So the messaging really will be about the fact that Newcastle will be holding fireworks for, on Separation Day. But you could see them from your home or from lots of different places. You don't have to come into Battery Park only to be able to experience the fireworks. So we're really pleased and excited that the state thinks that it's a great idea to hold fireworks. And, we'd like to proceed with doing them still down at Battery Park. There will, of course, be a fire line as to where people could not pass through, but it's never been a ticketed gated event. The afternoon festivities have been, gated, and typically we take down the fencing and barricades for the evening. So it would really kind of be par for the course in that regard, in that, we'll deal with folks as they come to the park, but we wouldn't expect there to be, masses of people, as we're really going to try and communicate that you can see them from a lot of different vantage points, including from home. Any questions?
Suzanne Souter here. So they are definitely going to be on Separation Day. We are not going to move them to the 4th of July.
That is correct.
Is that
That's
correct?
correct.
That's correct.
Okay, because I've had a number of comments about that, so I think people will be pleased. They see
Yes.
that as part of Newcastle's brand.
Absolutely.
Separation Day is ours. The 4th of July is everybody else's.
That's right.
I just had a few questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Joe Day. So I only assume we will not have shuttles running in and out of the city, and then I assume we're still going to have police and we're going to cordon off roads, and how does that actually work?
Bill, do you
Well-
want me to take that?
Well, if you want to take the buses and the transportation, and we'll bring the chief in, because he and I had some additional conversation about that today. So go ahead, Julie, and then I'll bring in Chief McCabe.
So I would just comment on the bus component. No, there would not be auxiliary parking, and there will not be busing into town.
And then Chief, if you want to just, as I mentioned, the chief and I talked today, as of this afternoon, it's still kind of a work in progress as to street closures and that type of thing. Chief, you want to add anything to that?
Yes, sir. And good question. I haven't officially sat down with Tim Moore yet, or Dave Majewski. We just touched base earlier today just to get some, get together to put an op plan together. But, as you know, typically we don't want to mix vehicular traffic with pedestrian traffic. So we're going to find a way to, that the footprint will probably look similar to what it has looked like. We were in the process of developing a pretty significant op plan for the last Separation Day, which would have been 2019, 2020, whenever. I've lost track of time. So we are looking to restrict the amount of vehicular traffic that makes it beyond 6th Street on South Street and to the wharf. So we've got some designing to do. We're going to put it in overdrive since we don't have a lot of time, but I hope to be able to put something out soon.
Thank
But
you, Chief.
Yeah, and I'd really like to talk to Goodwill first before I, say anything publicly.
I understand, and I appreciate it. And I realize it's a work in progress. I just kind of wanted to get an idea of, what it looked like going forward. So I understand that, you have more work to do and have to communicate with Goodwill. But I wanted to make sure that was moving along too. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Julie, Council President Platt, are we just going to advertise it locally to try to keep this crowds down to an extent, or is it, what's the plans for that?
Yeah, I think we will only advertise it locally. We'll work with the Weekly, and we may do a little bit of social media. We'll put it on our website, but we obviously, since the event will be in less than 30 days, we won't have a very robust marketing plan to bring in lots of people, from outside of Newcastle County for sure. But from outside of Newcastle itself, there will definitely be some social media that will go out about Separation Day fireworks.
Can't stop that. Hey, this is a dumb question too. And I know when they were talking about Penn Farm and us shooting the fireworks a little bit higher, is there any regulation with the FAA being so close to the airport?
I'm not familiar with there being any issue with the FAA. When I spoke with the fireworks company, they do know how close the airport is. I certainly can check. There are things that we have to do that the city has already put in place with the Coast Guard, but I'll double check if there are any restrictions because of the proximity to the airport. But I don't believe that they go high enough or that they are close enough. But
Okay.
I'll certainly be sure that we check into it.
Okay. Mr. Bergstrom, I saw you had your hand up.
If and when anybody applies for a fireworks permit, we'll discuss the regulations they've got to abide by then. Right now, it's getting pretty much down to the wire about whether they're going to be allowed to shoot. They've got to apply, you've got to go through the process.
Well, we are moving forward, correct, Mr. Barthel?
Yeah, we're absolutely moving forward.
Absolutely.
And I
Great.
hope whoever it is that has to look at that permit has an understanding that this isn't a result of not dragging our
No,
feet. It's
no,
a result of, so, you know, you need to make that clear to whoever's looking at that permit. And if they don't, and if you can't, I will.
No,
Right.
that'll be me, but we had multiple locations and the rules are different for each one of the 3 proposed locations. The rules were different on that topic. So
Got it.
I'm hoping I hear pretty soon and we can just get it settled.
I think people are very excited about this.
I hope so.
All right. Anything else, Julie?
Not from my point of view. I don't have anything else to add.
All right, Mr. President, should I continue?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you, Julie.
The next item that I have, Delmarva and gas meters. The update on that is out of the 9 gas meters that are on Delaware Street, 7 residents or businesses have agreed to put them inside. For some reason, they're having trouble reaching 2 residents. I'm not sure why, but they are continuing to reach out to those 2 folks. And I anticipate that those 9 meters will all be put inside the properties. And what I was told as of yesterday is that they intend to have that portion done by the end of June. So hopefully all of those meters will be, will be back or will be installed in the residence by the end of June. That's the date that I was given. The other thing in regard to Delmarva, and I know we're going to talk about this later on the agenda, the underground utilities. The information, again, the latest information I have received from them is that the project that was to have begun like today or tomorrow at the end of the month is now going to the fall, potentially the fall of this year and potentially the fall of 2022. So that obviously will place a factor in your conversation later on concerning the underground utilities, but just to let you know, that was part of the conversations that I had with them. Delaware Street, the contractor is going to begin next Monday, the week of May 17th. So the week of the 17th, they're going to do from 2nd Street to the Wharf and Dalby Alley. Then they're going to come back the week of June 7th and finish up the remainder of the street. I want to thank the mayor for helping us reach out to the contractor and helping with that situation a little bit. We've been on top of them, as you all know, and have all, Jeff, myself, have spoken to the company, and I can tell you that was a result of all of those conversations. So they will be notifying residents this week that they will be out there next week, and so we see a light at the end of that tunnel. Next item I have is, again, if the majority of council remembers from last month, I mentioned that, I believe it was last month or the month before, my intention to get in touch with the trust to discuss the housing program we have. From what we had that started, about a year ago or a little less than a year ago, we really didn't get any firm applications. So a conversation that I had with the president of the trustees, Pete Toner, Fred Gallagher, and the council president joined in on that conversation. We talked about expanding the program, and basically the decision from the trustees was that they wanted to expand it to include all exterior portions of the home, to expand it beyond sidewalks, just sidewalks and roofs, but maintaining the other qualifications. Must be owner occupied, 65 years or older, and there's an income requirement as well. So we'll get that out. Hopefully we'll start to see more results from that. I'm optimistic that we will.
Barthel, can I jump in there a second?
Sure.
Didn't we say any exterior renovations to the
Exterior.
house, including windows, exterior, I mean?
Exterior, I'm sorry.
Including
I
windows
apologize. It
and-
was just exterior, yes.
Right, but
Yeah.
you said roofs and sidewalks, but did we say windows and whatnot?
Well, no, what I'm saying is we agreed to roofs and sidewalks were the initial, what we initially agreed to do and what they initially agreed to do. The expansion is the remainder of the exterior of the house.
Any exterior, right?
Any,
Okay, just
right.
want to make that clear.
Correct. That's correct. Two more items, basketball courts. I know a couple of months back and perhaps more recently, there's been some internal discussions about opening up basketball courts within the city. I did contact Jamie Mack, the same gentleman that Julie referred to a couple of minutes ago at the state, about opening basketball courts, and his response to me was, quote, "There is nothing that would currently prevent the courts from opening or being used." So unless council has a concern that you'd like to voice at this point, it's my intention to move forward and open up the basketball courts throughout the city. We've ordered new baskets, new hoops. We had to cut the old hoops because of the way they were attached to the backboards. We had to cut them to get them off. So anyway, I expect I should have those within the next week or so, and we'll put those up. And again, unless council has any questions, my final item is, as Janet said, dates for our budget meeting. Budget meetings were, Mr. President, pretty much ready to go. If you'd like, we can discuss dates now, or we can send out some dates tomorrow to see what works for everybody. So, I mean, it's really, we're pretty much ready to go.
Send the dates out, but I was thinking maybe a little different procedural type operation. So let me send the dates out and it can be discussed at that point.
Okay. All right. That's all I have, Mr. President. And unless there are other questions for me, I'll see, Jeff, do you have anything you need to add at this point?
No, it should be a good season to start paving. Things are gonna be pretty hectic. Kalmar Nickel here, the week of the 7th, then paving going on in the plaza, but I think we're ready for it, and should be a nice job when we're finished.
All right. No questions for Jeff, and Chief, you're up.
Thank you very much. I do have a few things to discuss, but before I got started, I just wanted to check to see if council had any questions on the April report that was submitted. And if any generate, I'm here, obviously. Couple of things. First thing I wanted to talk about was I know there were some questions recently about a critical incident that we handled in Shawtown. I know there was confusion over the nature of the incident. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate a couple of things. We have, and I know we're only maybe 2.5 years into this, but with our Facebook page is growing, we are using that as our primary source of information, specifically when it comes to real-time stuff. It was a challenge for us to balance the nature of the incident, knowing, and I'll give you a little peek behind the curtain here, knowing what the incident was ourselves and whether or not it warranted releasing a lot of information from inside, recognizing that some of this is personal. So, and then balancing that with the concern for the surrounding areas if there were any threats. So we were confident that no neighbors were in any harm's way, and that there was no threat that could have made it outside of that incident. But at the same time, we recognized that, especially in this climate we're in now, we were dealing with an individual in crisis with a lot of unknowns. And as those unknowns grow, our response grows until we can de-escalate. It was successfully handled through de-escalation, through conversation, but we were prepared with the assistance of other agencies in the event that things were to get a little bit worse. So we had hoped that by responding or posting that the incident resolved itself peacefully would have been enough to maybe quell any concerns, if I said that right, for public safety. So, and I just want to assure council that if we, for any reason, thought that there was a threat, we would have posted something we would have acted very quickly. I talk to the city administrator regularly when we go through these events. MSC, we've used MSC before for the reverse 911. We would have taken those steps without a doubt, and we would have posted something a little bit more specific. I know there may have been some confusion with an incident that occurred earlier in the day in Smyrna, where it was a horrible situation where a man had killed his wife or his girlfriend, or and I don't know if maybe some of that bled into our story. I'm not sure, but somewhere out there, another post, another social media post had alluded to the fact that we were investigating a murder. And I just want to assure council that if we were investigating a murder, I would share that. It is our goal to make sure that folks know what's happening in real time, and we release whatever information that we can without, without violating anybody's rights. So a couple of things to take away from that maybe are follow us. I would not follow your neighbors when it comes to what we're doing. People start to speculate, and then that rumor starts to grow. So I would not follow anybody else's page, and then I wouldn't add to that. So I wouldn't post anything. I would avoid the speculative stuff. We've had unfortunately, we've dealt with a handful of these incidents recently, and it seems to have worked out where I'm in constant communication with the city administrator, where hopefully he's relaying the information to council. And then when it's over, I'm certainly available to take whatever calls from anybody. I hope nobody ever feels like that line of communication doesn't exist. I recognize that, I answer to you, and I want to make sure that when you have questions, I have the answers. And it seems to have been working out where in real time, when we're in the heat of the moment, I can focus on our responsibilities. We also, we have a very solid system here where we have staff officers that have specific jobs. I have a PIO, I have an operations officer, and we're communicating with each other. So, but we're not quite to the level, I don't know that we ever will be, but we're not quite to the level where I have 10 or 11 people on my staff that can handle these things. So they may not be as quick to get out sometimes as you'd like, but that is something that we're working on, is something that we really want. We don't want those questions lingering any longer than they need to be. So I didn't know before I moved on if anybody had any other questions about that or any concerns.
Good job.
Thank you. That was a job well done by our staff officers, by the way. I was in the background on that. Another initiative I wanted to talk about was we've been getting a lot of complaints about quality of life issues. I know I talked about this as the weather started to warm. I knew we were going to see an increase in some of these things. My staff and I had this discussion, and I kind of put it on them to say, let's figure out a better way to address some of these issues. So I know I have spoken about this for several years, and unfortunately with COVID, a lot of these initiatives have been put on hold. One of the things that I wanted to do, and I wanted to do it for a while, is to create a community resources liaison, where the specific position for this officer is to deal with community relations, to build contacts within each community, develop relationships with community leaders in different neighborhoods, and get a better understanding for what's happening in a specific location. I also wanted this officer to be responsible for low-level mediation prior to enforcement, right? There's a lot more to policing than just enforcement. There's the community contacts and relationships that have to get developed to avoid the enforcement part of it. So I've enacted the community resources liaison a little bit earlier than I had anticipated, because I am a little short-staffed. So he's a patrol officer. He's going to be assigned to a squad. He's working shift work. He's not going to have the availability that I would like from this full-time position. But once we get our folks through the academy and we're up to full strength, and I've been saying that for 22 years, but once we get to that point, we hope to have this guy full-time. It's Paul Austin. I think many of you know him. If you can't get along with Paul, then there's something wrong. So he's a very soft-spoken man, and he does well. He was our K-9 officer, so he made a lot of friends in the community. We're working on different ways to get to get him access to folks. But again, like I said, he's on patrol. So I've already put him out there to deal with a few low-level issues, parking issues on 3rd Street or 2nd Street. Some issues in Dobbinsville with street basketball, dirt bikes and stuff like that. So we're going to work on this from that perspective. And we added to this, and this is something my staff came up with, is our directed patrol. We're going to change the way we direct patrol. And we're going to force a squad. That's a horrible word first, force. We're going to encourage squads. We've assigned neighborhoods to different squads. So, in a perfect world, we have a 3-person squad, a supervisor and 2 patrol officers. They'll be assigned to that neighborhood where they're going to address the quality of life issues. I'm going to give them names if I've already gotten them through folks that maybe are texting the elected officials. And I'm going to ask that they reach out to them, talk to them about quality of life issues, develop these contacts, and then develop strategies that the communities can resolve their own issues before the enforcement gets there. A perfect example could be the street basketball. We don't want to have to enforce a city ordinance on kids playing basketball on the street. So if it's not a problem in Boothurst, but it's a problem somewhere else, then we address that problem geographically, right? And if it becomes an issue where traffic's obstructed, quality of life is affected, and we can't resolve it with community, if neighbors can't figure out how to resolve it amongst themselves and it rises to that level, then my community resources officer will come back to us and say, I think we have to look at some enforcement. And then we'll proactively push this through some outreach to say, look, this is the next step. Again, this is a trend that you're going to see that spreads outside of the city of Newcastle. This is a trend that a lot of folks want to see to avoid, that narrative that you're hearing about with the over policing. The idea is, see if you can't help us correct some of the quality of life issues in your neighborhood. So that's kind of what this is going to look like. We get complaints about stop sign violations, speed, dirt bikes. We're going to take different approaches at this. We're going to look to see if we can, if they're local residents that are committing the violations and we can figure out how to stop this, we will. If we're not effective doing this through community relations, then we'll step up enforcement. And when we do that, we're gonna let folks know through our social media that we're having a lot of quality of life stop sign violations, speed violations, wherever, and we're going to take action. And that will be universal action, right? So if my brother speeds on a certain particular street, he's not going to get a break. If it has risen to the level where we have to, to take that type of action, that's what's going to happen. The dirt bikes is another issue, and I just wanted to put some folks at ease here. I know it's an issue. I know it's frustrating. We are working with our cameras, with members of the community, with other agencies to try to create an evidence-based prosecution system. What that means is we see a dirt bike, we're not going to chase it. The likelihood that we're going to get them to stop and write them a ticket is very low because they're not going to stop. So what we are going to do is if we're in the area when it happens, we're going to try to record it with our cameras. There are so many cameras through private residences and businesses. It's growing and it's becoming incredibly effective. We just cleared a significant case downtown with some cameras. So we're going to use that. The county police are out on ATVs. They're running the Markel Trail as well, because this dirt bike problem is not just a Newcastle City problem. It is a huge problem all over. And we're going to share information. And if we can identify who these riders are, then we're going to take it to the next level where we execute search warrants on residents. And if we can remove a bike and seize it and stop it, that's what we'll do. But we're going to ask for some help from the community. So, and I'm sorry to put you in the middle here, Mr. Mayor, but if you text the mayor that John Doe is on his dirt bike for the 8th time today, I'm going to suggest that you redirect that information to us through our community resources liaison, through the on-call staff officer, because you can send an email and the staff officer is going to get it like that. Tell us how you know it's John Doe, right? If you haven't, and then help us prosecute him. If he's not listening, If by talking to John Doe doesn't stop it, then I'm going to need you to help provide us information that will get us into John Doe's mom's shed or John Doe's grandmom's shed, wherever he's storing this bike, so that we can take it from him. Sometimes these things clear themselves up when neighbors talk to neighbors and say, you got to tell your kid to stop riding a bike up and down the street here. He's going to kill himself. He's going to kill somebody else. That's more, sometimes can be more effective than we get involved. But we also recognize that when people see these violations, again, we're the face of that frustration. Where's the cops when you need them? And I'll say this, I've said it since I've been in this desk. I say it just as much as you do. So I get it. We have thick skin when it comes to stuff like that, but we need help. The passive aggressive post about we're never around when you need us is not effective. We're creating avenues and conduits for folks to effectively communicate to us. You know who John Doe is. Help me identify him. Give me the ability to put that information into a search warrant so I can get something out of his shed. So our goal with this program is to get the community a little bit more involved in helping us reduce these quality of life issues before enforcement becomes an issue. And the last element to this would be the low-level mediation would be if criminal conduct does occur and there is a complaint made and both parties are agreeable, we want to try to mediate this at a low level. This would be victimless crimes or very, very low-level crimes that we would have the authority to be able to do that. So there's a lot to this. Again, this is going to be challenging to start while this officer's on patrol, but it's a concept that I hope people start to recognize and help us facilitate, because we can't do it by ourselves. The other part of this would be if you're getting texts or emails or complaints from multiple folks in your area, then maybe we can facilitate meetings for that group. I'd really like to get neighborhoods in here again. I want to open these doors up again. We've got this community room where we can have these discussions. That the discussion we had about Pat's Tavern was effective, and it started in this community room with community sponsorship and community interaction. So that's our goal with this plan. I hope it's I hope I can get some help in pushing it, and I really do look forward to talking more about this as any kind of effectiveness we have with it. And I had two more points, unless there was a question about that before I moved on.
The only thing I wanted to ask, Chief, is I'm sorry, it's Joe Day, is can you put out the information about the ATVs on your Facebook page so that people get the contact information to call and put it out there so that they understand what the process is to reporting?
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll figure out a way to get that message out.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. That's a great question. On a positive note, Saturday, May 22nd, Captain Dempsey has, this is an initiative that Captain Dempsey has been trying to facilitate for some time, and it looks like he's been successful here. So we did post on Facebook that on May the 22nd, he and some officers are going to be on the Markel Trail at the cross on Delaware Street with hundreds of pamphlets about bike safety, bike laws, hoping to interact with bikers as they cross. We're hoping for a nice day, hoping for big crowds. And there's going to be a handful of things that happen here. We're hoping for some open dialogue with bikers to kind of reinforce some of the bike safety issues that local residents are seeing, where people may be over analyzing the laws, where they've been given permission to run through stop signs and red lights. That, although that might be true, if there's nobody coming, we want to make sure that they recognize that if there's somebody coming, it's probably not a good idea to blow through the stop sign. Which way they should be riding and stuff like that, how to read bike signs, what they should or shouldn't do with earphones. But it's also going to be an opportunity for Captain Dempsey to push the Protect DNA initiative that we started some time ago. Again, this is on our website. There's a link there, but in a nutshell, he'll be able to provide the Protect DNA where we can mark the bike so that if the bike is stolen and it's recovered somewhere else, we take our phone, somebody takes our phone, swipes it over where it was marked, and it comes back to who it is. And he's going to develop a bike registry as well. So we're hoping folks take advantage of that. And again, that's May 22nd from 9 in the morning till 1 in the afternoon. The last thing I wanted to talk about, I wanted to take a minute to recognize the officers here that once again, they really did, they impressed me. They went out of their way yesterday to pay tribute. To pay tribute to an officer. I'm sorry. These officers went out of the way to pay tribute to an officer that lost his life. We met at Middletown at 2 in the morning. I can't believe this is happening. These guys work hard. They met in Middletown at 2 in the morning with a handful of other agencies, drove down to Del Mar. The funeral didn't start till I think 12. But we were there to do everything we could to show support to that agency and to his family. We had a huge showing, for a little department like this, 10 officers met at 2 in the morning. We led a significant convoy down, and it was remarkable to see these officers do this. It's hard, especially on days off or when you're working nights, to give up a day like that. But to say at 2 in the morning was remarkable. So I'm proud of them. I hope you are. And it was nice for a change to see, as tragic as that event was, to see the amount of support that we got, not just locally, but geographically. So I apologize for that. I just wanted to make sure you knew that these young men and women, that they're remarkable, and they represented this city very well on Monday. So, and that's all I had.
Thank you, Chief. No need to apologize. I listened to this service on the radio today, and it was very impressive. Mr. Barthel, anything else?
That's it, Mr. Platt. That's all I have. Well, we have.
Council communication.
Suzanne Sowdy here. I just have two small things. Some neighbors have thanked us for the trash cans that were placed by the tennis court. I have noticed that they seem to be being used. There is some question about could one be put on 3rd Street Extended, because there is trash accumulating in the vacant lot behind the parking area on 3rd Street across from the Progressive Club. After the big cleanup on the 17th, that lot was clean. And when I walked down there today, I noticed there's trash in it again. And if we could put a can on the corner there where that, I think it's called Penn Street, that little dirt street that runs up behind the senior center, that might, it's on the trash truck route, so it shouldn't delay the guys in their work. And that might help keep the trash from accumulating on that lot. Thanks. And okay, the other issue was about the fireworks, which has already been resolved. Thank you.
Yeah, I have, go.
I'm sorry, Mr. Barthel, I did see we did a couple of trash cans. I think there's an older one down at the Battery. Do we have any older ones to put down there?
We do, and I also believe actually we also have an additional newer one that's still at the barn, I believe. So we can take care of that.
There's two new ones and an old one by the tennis courts, which is great. Because that's where a lot of stuff is with the water bottles and stuff from the tennis players now that it's getting warmer. But if you could put maybe one of the older ones or whichever you have, but even an old one would be better than none. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's fine. We can absolutely take care of that.
Councilperson Leary here. I had received a communication a couple of weeks ago from someone about the dock at the Bull Hill Boat Club. It was pretty unsafe. That was taken down about a week ago, I guess. Is that it, Mr. Barthel? The city went out there and removed it.
Part of it.
Go ahead.
Part of it.
And then also the neighbors down there noticed that the city was out there. They had asked for a dumpster to be brought in, and they were going to go pick out trash themselves, but they noticed that yesterday, and they let me know that they noticed that the city was out there cleaning picking up all of that stuff so that we wouldn't need the dumpster. But they were very happy with that. The boat ramp, I know the chief is probably aware. The boat ramp for Goodwill Fire Company is, there's people have been parking illegally in front of it, which has delayed access for Goodwill. I was in touch with the Pete Toner, the trustees, since that area of the park is under the management of the trustees. And I've asked them to look at putting a larger signs in there about no parking and perhaps striping the area right in front of the boat ramp. So it's more evident, like, don't park here.
The current.
But you
the
can lead a
current-
horse to water, you can't make him drink. And I'm
The
still
current
waiting
su-
to hear from Mr. Toner on that.
The current sign is pretty subtle. It just doesn't.
And the last thing was just something I caught, Mr. President, was, could you expand on the new budget procedure that you want to use so that those of us, if it might affect how we give you our availability for scheduling the meetings?
I can. I know over the last 4 years, the previous president wanted to sit each meeting and do line by line by line, and we would kind of nitpick it apart so we could find the discretionary spending. I don't think that we should not go by line by line by line, but I think what we should do is we should all receive a copy of the budget. It should be put on the website, and any questions we have for the administrator or staff, we should email them. All those questions should be answered at once instead of dragging it out over a 10 or 12-hour process. So we can do a lot of questioning prior to email. They can all be wrapped into one meeting and we don't have to sit through 6 or 8 meetings.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Roscoe, does that meet the public meeting FOIA rules?
And that's why I said I have to check into it.
It
All
strikes
right, I mean,
me,
it sounds great, but we don't want to run afoul of FOIA.
council members, it sounds to me like you could accomplish this if the questions were simply directed to Mr. Bartveld, and he could be prepared to respond at your budget meeting, and that way everybody's questions are answered without it being a lot of cross communications with council members.
Thank you, Mr. Lusky. And that was my thinking. Everything could be just wrapped up in one meeting versus a whole lot of them.
Mr. President, this is Russ Smith. Related to the budget meeting, that's basically the only planning we do, the only annual planning we do. And basically all we're doing is figuring out how to keep the lights on. We never get together to figure out any kind of annual plan, look at the comp plan and see what we want to accomplish this year, and maybe delegate responsibilities to different members of council. I know in the past we've just gotten involved in those things that we've been interested in, but I would hope we could actually do a little bit more in the way of proactive planning. It doesn't necessarily mean more money. It just means maybe we emphasize better and that we make better use of our own in-council resources.
I agree 100% with you. I guess over the last 4 years, the way I looked at budgets, meetings and whatnot, is staff would put a budget together and then we would just nitpick it apart. And I think they do a fine job, and they're normally right where they should be most of the time. And anytime we've never added to any subject that they put out at the meeting, we've only taken away. And that money that's taken away is always dropped into the bucket of discretionary spending. And that's why I wanted, like I said, I want open discussion, but I don't think we have to drag it out over 6, 8, 10 meetings.
Actually, we've never had 6, 8, or 10 meetings. We usually do about 3 or 4.
And they go 3 and 4 hours, and they're in the middle of the afternoon. So,
I just know how it was a good opportunity for me, especially when I was new. I don't know about Russ or Suzanne, to actually go line by line in that first meeting to see what everything is. So that's just my opinion, and discretionary spending funds a lot of what goes on in the city. So I also think that's very important that we find that, and then we're able to give those funds to who needs them in the city. So.
Ms. Leary, one thing that stood out in my mind, and when we questioned the chief of police on how many bullets he needed and tried to cut that, that really stood out that we were interfering with staff. And like I said, right now, it's still a thought. I appreciate all the comments, and I'll let everybody know how the meetings will progress.
Yeah, it is planning, just like Mr. Smith said. There's a lot more to plan when you're looking at the budget than just the budget. So there's what we're going to do with everything. So, and it would be a good opportunity for Mr. Day as well.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, Mr. President. I wanted to echo Suzanne's comments. I've heard from several of my neighbors about the trash cans here at the tennis courts. I'm amazed at how many people actually stop and have used the cans. So thank you for doing that. I've seen a huge improvement. I also wanted to mention that the Newcastle Sailing Club did have their cleanup. I did participate in the cleanup on the 17th of last month. It seemed to be very successful. They seem to have a ton of volunteers, and you know, we should be thanking them for that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Day, I agree. I participated as well, and it seemed to me like there were more people than usual, and they covered a larger area because there were more people. They went further out along the trail, so that was good.
I think people are hungry to get out. May Market was an absolute success this weekend.
Wow.
And
Oh, absolutely, yes.
so,
It's good to see things starting to return to normal.
Mr. President, could you carry our thanks forward to the Sailing Club?
Absolutely. Anyone else? Mr. Mayor?
All right, thank you very much. Based on those last couple of comments, I think we ought to be pretty deliberate about our thoughts about how fireworks will go, because I think there probably is an awful lot of pent up interest, and we're going to be coming ahead of the 4th of July by several weeks, and so we might be in for quite the crowd. Let me thank everybody. I'm just going to share. I'll violate my own HIPAA code here. I've been fully vaccinated, and I would encourage everybody else to do it. I have had the Pfizer product, but COVID vaccinations are slowing down a little bit in the state. I was on the state database today. About a third of the state's population has been fully vaccinated. Close to half, or about half, has had at least one dose, and that's all very encouraging, but things are slowing down a little bit. So I would just encourage people. The products have been approved for people 16 years and older. Today, the FDA announced that the Pfizer product is okay for people ages 12 to 15. The governor and, as mentioned before, Jamie Mack, who's a senior director at the Department of Public Health for the state of Delaware. They've signaled, along with Dr. Rattay, who runs the department, that there's a possibility to do vaccination events where there are large gatherings. So that's something that we all ought to be on the lookout for. Also, just for our own residents' purposes, Uber and Lyft also today announced, in conjunction with the president, that they're going to be providing free transportation for people who have proof of a vaccination appointment. So all that's really good, and I would just encourage more people, and if you get a chance to talk to folks, please encourage them to give a vaccination a serious consideration. Let me congratulate Scott Bloomquist. I know Scott was on the call earlier. He's not on any longer, but congratulations to him for his appointment. at the Municipal Services Commission. I know there's been some conversation. A few people have raised questions about kind of what's going on at MSC, and I want to just speak for just a moment about this. The past appointments over at the MSC have taken place in this kind of format where the mayor, the council, and the trustees have nominated somebody to serve. Those are terms that have gone on for quite some time. The trustees on their own have decided to end that relationship. So that created an opportunity for the MSC and the council and myself to kind of rethink how that representation would go. And so after a lot of conversation, it was settled upon that the mayor would give up his or her appointment, and the council would have two, and the mayor would in fact become a commissioner. That is the plan going forward. I think that will result in a lot more alignment in terms of the city's comprehensive plan, major infrastructure programs and projects that are underway. And I think that all comes with a lot better alignment and much to the benefit of the residents of the city. Let me also talk about next Saturday's event in Battery Park. The city is hosting with the Volunteer Arts Council. As we know, it is volunteer. There is no formal arts council. It's all volunteer, but the city is hosting Opera Delaware once again, and that is going to be on Saturday at 2 o'clock. Weather permitting. If there is rain, I think Bill, just give me a thumbs up if I'm right here, or a thumbs down if I'm wrong. The rain date is the same date, same time, but on Sunday if we are rained out. Correct. Okay. So hopefully we'll have good weather on Saturday. This was a real success last year when we did it, and we're looking forward to having them back. You have before you a nomination tonight for a vacancy. Thank you, Mr. Day, for your service on the Planning Commission. We filled your vacancy from the Board of Health last meeting, but this is to fill Mr. Day's now vacated post on the Planning Commission. On the call tonight is Matthew Lovely. Some of you, I think most of you know Matt, long-term resident. He and his wife Esther, former business owners, very active in the community, residents of East 5th Street. And I'm grateful for his willingness to serve. And I'm sure later in the meeting, if you have any questions of him, he'd be happy to answer them. Finally, let me say this. I know that you've got a discussion item about parking on West 3rd Street, or maybe, I'm sorry, that's, I guess, East 3rd Street. It is a real challenging part of the community, as is the narrowness, the speed with which cars come down that road, as is Cherry Street. And I've heard from residents over there as well. So these continue to be issues to think about. I'm not a traffic engineer, but I'm sharing those, and I want the public to know that as I accumulate those bits of information, I hope, like all of you, we're sharing those with Bill and with the chief, so that they can kind of look over options and try to figure out the best path forward. Sometimes there's nothing better than the status quo, but every now and then perhaps there are things that we can do. And so I'm grateful to all of you for considering that discussion item tonight. Mr. President, I have nothing more, so I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, it was on my agenda. I'm going to agree with all the other council people. I did not attend the Battery Park cleanup, but from what I understand, there was a huge crowd and it was an excellent job. So I do want to thank the members of the Salem Club for organizing it. I know there was a couple other organizations involved. I think the Lions Club was down there and all, but I just want to thank everybody who went out and did that. I just have one question for the administrator. Street cleaning. I know we kind of didn't put a lot of that on damper due to COVID last year, people being at home, kind of deviated from the schedule. Are we revisiting that this year?
Yes, Mr. President. In fact, about a week or so ago, we started back sweeping streets. We're going to do it in the same fashion we did it last year. If everybody remembers, again, we ordered the signs to start an official program that would have gone up February a year ago, but of course, or I should say March or so a year ago, and then of course COVID hit, and we chose not to put the signs up because of enforcement issues, being in the beginning of the pandemic, and quite frankly, where we are now, God willing, we're at the end of the pandemic, but we're still in a state of emergency. So to answer your question, at this point, we don't intend to put up the signs, the no parking signs, for enforcement reasons primarily, while the pandemic continues, while the state of emergency continues. But the simple answer to your question is yes, we've started sweeping and we will continue to sweep the various
Okay.
communities.
Very good. My second question is, I guess, too, do we buy 2 new cars that we talked about in this year's budget? I drove past a trolley
Yes,
bar and I
we
saw
did.
2 cars
Yes,
sitting
we
there
did.
and I was just curious.
Yes, in fact, thank you for bringing that up. I should have mentioned that. We did get the 2 electric vehicles.
They're both
They were-
electric?
They were the 2 electric vehicles, correct.
Excellent. What
They
type
were
were they,
delivered.
just to let everybody know?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you making that, remembering that we did that. Thank you.
Get out and about every once in a while. Okay, that's all I have for tonight. Next public comments. If we have any comments, just please raise your hand and Kim will let you in. We have 3 minutes to speak. Kim, I see we have Mr. Gross.
Yes, I'm sorry, my mouse wasn't working. Let me let him in and okay, Mr. Gross is in the meeting.
Good evening, council. The main thing that I want to address, and I have no idea why it's reared its head again, is the vote and discussion on resolution 2021-15. Basically, the traffic light that's currently at the intersection of 6th and Delaware Street needs to be replaced. We went over this 7-8 meetings a couple years ago. And it was definitely decided upon, even with state engineer and DelDOT, that it was a positive move. And the signs put there would not only cause accidents, but also have people back up with traffic because of their hesitation of moving forward through the intersection. After speaking with someone connected with the fire company, they brought an excellent reason why there's no reason to have stop signs. It would be a hazard to the community and other pedestrians and motorists, that a lot of the new apparatuses, emergency vehicles, fire trucks, are outfitted with the same type of receiver that would control the new lights with the new technology. So by not putting a light at that intersection would be a disaster. Plus, you already went through the fact that the state's covering the bill. And I've talked to people that we will lose that money if we put off doing it. If that project does not go through and you want to continue, Mr. Platt, with having stop signs put in as a test project, it's going to have a disastrous effect. And all the council people agreed at that time. So there's absolutely no reason for it to be brought up again. And you can confirm it with state and city engineers that a new traffic light with new technology is a positive move versus a stop sign. So it's just, I don't know why it's been brought up again. Thank you.
Okay, I have some additional emails that came in.
Okay.
And I didn't see the ones that came in. I don't know if they were forwarded, but do you want me to read them?
If you like, I just have the one from Dorothy Fisk.
Okay, if you want to do that, if you want to look at that one, I've got three others that came in
Okay.
before the deadline.
It says, what reason is Council President Platt for proposing resolution 2021-15 question mark? I doubt it's a good one. 3 years ago, council obtained permission from the state that LDOT would pay to replace the traffic light at the intersection of 6th and Delaware with a new one because of the proposal to put a four-way stop sign in. There was a determination that was a determination to be very dangerous. The facts have not changed. This is a bad idea to change the method of controlling traffic there. If Mr. Platt's resolution is carried out, there will be accidents at the location that would not have occurred if a new traffic light had been installed instead of stop signs. The question I would like to ask is, what is Mr. Platt's reasoning for asking council to rescind these two resolutions, the second of which passed 2 months ago with his vote? Sincerely, Dorothy Fisk. If I did not get any other ones, if you'd like to read them, please feel free.
Okay, this one is from Mr. DeMundi. It says, it was debated years ago and voted it would be dangerous to regress from a stop signal to 4 stop signs, whereas it would be quadruple the chances of an accident. With this in mind, the city should be liable for any mishaps and accidents. You're going from 2 variables to 4, 1 red light, 1 green light, to 4 whatever, and 4 drivers at the 4 stop signs determined to do. All this for what? It was determined that any cost was absorbed by the city of light maintenance, namely a $29 light bulb every 20 years. DelDOT has spent $0. What is their motive in wanting to remove our red light? Increase traffic flow through the center of our already overcrowded streets. A more realistic approach would be to start enforcing truck limits and traffic laws. In our south neighborhoods, the roads, they are non-existent. John A. DeMundi. And I have one from Dan Bungie from 108 East 4th Street. His reads, I am against the removal of the town's only traffic light. I am also against the removal or replacing of any stop signs. And I have
Go ahead. Swat.
okay, one more for I have one from Dennis Young.
Kim, can you mute Rose?
Yes, I did. Okay.
Thank you.
And this last one I have that came in as an email is, good evening, members of council. I understand that there will be a discussion tonight in council regarding the proposal to eliminate the electronic traffic light at 6th and Delaware. I offer my input on this matter as a strong no. There are 3 reasons. First, 4-way stop signs will create a risk of negative human responses, especially on summer Friday afternoons when traffic through our city swells and fills 6th, 5th, and South Street, with vehicles heading down Route 9. I fear stop signs will cause more backup and flared tempers that will result in impetuous behaviors as such will resent weights and or resentment that the car to your right has just pushed through the stop sign illegally. Which gets to my second point. My Mozart Gallery is on the corner of 2nd and Delaware, where there is at present a stop sign is a total joke. I frequently will observe vehicles, even those of some of our own residents, either slide through this or speed through the intersection. This happens close to 50% of the time, and I am hardly exaggerating. This might not be so much endangering oncoming motorists, but it certainly risks the welfare of pedestrians crossing Delaware Street from a blind spot in front of my shop where speeding vehicles do not see. This example of human nature will translate to the 6th and Delaware intersection, guarded by 4 dark metal signs. Third, those aforementioned metal signs are typically planted on the corners of sidewalks to the right of the entering motorists. Some drivers, impaired or older, will inevitably miss seeing the sign. some others, such as those mentioned in my second point, will just exert their executive privilege and slide or speed through the intersection, risking collision with others who are turning on the red. I suspect such inattention or exemption is likely, much less likely, when in the middle of the intersection, hung by wires, are brilliantly lit red lights, festive even during Christmas time when there is heavy snow falling. Thanks to you for all your attention to my message. Dennis Young, Mozart Gallery. And that's all I had.
Thank you. Anyone else?
No, there's no other hands raised.
We'll move forward with the agenda right now. I think I'm going to skip over a few things just to get through the, instead of tying these people up, they don't have to sit through the entire meeting. The first one would be Resolution 2021-16, the mayor's approval of Matthew Lovey for the to the Planning Commission to replace Joe Day. Do I have a motion on that?
So moved.
Second,
I'll read the resolution. Resolution 202116. Resolution approving mayor's appointment to the Planning Commission of Matthew A. Lovey to fulfill the unexpired term of Joseph F. Day III. Whereas Newcastle City Code provides the mayor of the city of Newcastle appointees 9 members to the Planning Commission, subject to confirmation by City Council, each for 3 years terms. And whereas there is a current one vacant position on the Planning Commission. And whereas City Council proposed it to confirm the appointment of Matthew Lovey to fulfill the unexpired term of Joseph F. Day III, with the term ending July 11, 2023. Now therefore, let it be resolved that the City Council hereby confirms the appointment of the following person to the Planning Commission. Any conversations on this?
no.
Lovey, would like to introduce yourself? You're in the audience. Still here?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for consideration. Happy to get involved. Really looking forward to being part of a team that means so much to the city that I love.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. Any other questions from council?
No,
Nope.
Motion?
No.
the motion was made and seconded already. We just have to vote.
Vote, okay. Still learning the ropes.
That's okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any negatives? Motion so approved. The second is approving resolution 2021-17, approving a request for Conoco Ice to operate a roving vending truck operation within the city limits.
So moved.
Second.
Now I'll read the resolution. Resolution 2021-17, resolution approving vending request of Conoco Ice in the city in Newcastle as of a vending and roving truck operation within the city limits of Newcastle. Whereas the city of Newcastle code require licensing of vendors within the city of Newcastle, and whereas Conoco Ice of Newcastle has petitioned to be considered for a vendor's permit and has supplied all the required documents, including required insurance, state health department certification, and city of Newcastle business license. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that the city of Newcastle has granted Conoco Ice of Newcastle a vendor permit to sell water ice from a roving truck in the calendar year 2021 with following considerations. Vendor may operate only in the following location, roving truck throughout the city before 8 p.m. with the options to park silently at the wharf located at a location to be determined by the city administrators. Questions on this?
Yes, yes.
Mr. Smith?
Um, I have real reservations about this truck being parked at the wharf. That's an important location to the city. I think it'll be a terrible visual intrusion. Maybe down at the end of 3rd Street. But I just think given the design of the vehicle, it just, I don't think fits in with the character of Newcastle, and certainly the wharf, which is one of our prime historic locations in the city.
Is that only because of the way the truck's painted?
Pretty much. If it was painted dull, some dull color, maybe it would fit in better, but it's big and it's loud. And I think that's a real problem. You wouldn't park that in front of the courthouse, I don't think. And I think that the wharf has the same kind of importance, visual importance to the city.
Suzanne Souter here. My memory is that we discussed this issue, I don't know, not last year, probably in 2019, and approved a different ice cream truck to be able to park at the wharf with the only, with the only provision is that they couldn't keep the music going once they were parked. And that was my second issue was, is this the same vendor with a new truck, or is this a different vendor? And what about the old vendor? Could we potentially have 2 roving ice cream trucks in town?
Okay.
Have we heard from the other one?
Mr. Bartel?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Platt. To my knowledge, we have not heard from the other vendor. I see the gentleman who I believe owns this truck is in the meeting, but just to clarify what council had decided, you're correct in the sense that council has made decisions in the past about typically one truck that has the, you're granting permission for, again, typically one truck to roam the city. And the way the council set up basically the decision-making, if you will, from that point was what spots would be allocated down at the wharf for basically no more than, if I recall, 3 vendors. So you've got typically your hot dog vendor who's down there, who's already requested a spot. And then we have this gentleman, and we usually we may get another person, but it's really a decision about, okay, to Mr. Smith's point, what type or the size of the vehicle, that type of thing. So that is how that was basically debated and agreed to. I think you're right, in 2018 or 2019. And it had actually come up to council before through other summers or through other springs through the years, and council had made the decision about what truck would be able to roam the city, with whatever type of sound it permeates, that type of thing. But like I said, a few years ago, it was, put to the council said, let the administrator figure that out. And I'm more than willing to kick that back to you guys. No, just saying, based on Mr. Smith's comment, if, but seriously, that's how that was decided upon a couple of years ago.
This is Ed with Kona Ice. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Ed.
Okay, so the question about having a big truck in front of the wharf there, that's sad. We do have 2 units. One is a physical truck. The other that I'm pretty sure I gave you pictures of. If not, I can. It's called a kiosk. It's and the top opens up. Yes, that right there. That is much smaller. It's actually smaller than your typical minivan. So it's got a lower profile and a smaller footprint, but still we can still make as much shaved ice on that as we can the truck. But you're right, it's not as big as the truck.
I guess my question was, is this something you're going to park for 8 hours a day, or when it says roving, I'm just curious.
The truck is the one that we would drive through the developments and the streets. The kiosk is what we would park at the wharf or wherever you designate us to, because it's smaller.
do not see a picture of the kiosk in their packet.
I think the mayor just had a picture of it up on the,
I'm going to share my
Oh.
screen. Hold on one second.
Okay,
yes. That is a picture of the kiosk.
Would you have both operations going on at the same time?
Probably not. It would probably just be one or the other. You know, we'd probably run that in the afternoons, like say sometime in the morning to the afternoon, and then in the evening, then we take the truck around the developments.
and is that kiosk drivable or is it tow behind? It's a tow behind, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions for him? Any other
The parking of the vehicle or the tow behind, whichever one, certainly, I don't, I'm not sure where Mr. Barthel approves parking, but it doesn't have to be in the front line there by the wharf. It can be around on the corner where the porta potties were traditionally for the summer concert, so it's not in a direct visual of the view and the wharf. Just a thought.
The tow behind certainly is less visually intrusive, and if we could keep it away from the view shed of the wharf and maybe back down the street a little bit, as Valerie suggests, then I would not have an objection.
Thank you.
Mr. President, can I make a motion?
Absolutely.
I make a motion, we approve the truck for roving in the city, and we approve the tow behind at the wharf at the discretion of the city administrator, the location.
Second,
We have a second to motion. All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Nays?
Thank you very much, Councilman.
Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, let me just get my notes together, guys. Okay, before I read resolution 2021-15, we have Peter Haig from DelDOT here to bring us up to date a little bit on what's happening, and I think we have some visuals. So Peter, if you'd like to take over at this point. You're muted.
Sure, thank you. I was waiting for the settings to pop up, so I appreciate it. Good evening, Mayor, Councilman, and then Council President. I appreciate the time. As I'm just bringing up my presentation. Are you able to see the presentation?
I am.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So at the request of the city, I'm here again. My name is Peter Haig, DelDOT's Chief of Traffic Engineering. I'm here to talk to you through about the intersection of 6th Street and Delaware Street. This presentation, it was updated a little bit, but it essentially includes the content that was included a few years ago when we presented to the city about the topic, I believe in like 2018 time period. So again, with every presentation, the department likes to start out just identifying our mission, excellence in transportation, every trip, every mode, every dollar, every one. So my agenda here tonight, I'm going to give you an update on our active signal design project that was based on the resolution from 2018, and then also discuss some of the information that was collected as part of the always stop control conversion study that was completed in between 2016 to 2018. So where we stand today is we're actively working on an updated traffic signal design for the intersection. This is, again, a very detailed oriented plan for what we would do for developing our signal designs for any upgrades statewide. It's in a draft format right now, and we're working through with the city through the development of that design. A few weeks ago, we had a field review with city administrator and other members of the city. And we marked out where these new devices would be placed, or this infrastructure for the signal design. So some of these, I guess, identifiers highlight or circled in red really identify that equipment. And when you start looking at where the placement of this equipment would go in relationship to some of the infrastructure that exists there, the sidewalk chalk that was provided in the utility markout plain temporary paint that was used in the landscape, to just kind of visually show what our cabinet, our pole designs would be at the location. The center photo is the corner where the funeral home, the funeral property is located. There was no markings that were placed at that location due to a service that was in place during the time of the field review. So we just wanted to be sensitive to the nature while we were out there. But the other corners were identified. You could see that in the upper left corner is included in that landscape where approximate our signal cabinet would go if the signal was rebuilt. That cabinet, just to give you a sense of the size of that, it's about 50 inches high, 30 inches wide, and about 18 inches deep. The bottom left corner where the signal pole placement would be approximately installed, that pole from a size perspective, the rectangular square is about 21 inches by 21 inches. And then the diameter of the actual pole is about 16 inches. And that's consistent with the southeast corner, which is in the upper right corner. The bottom right corner, which includes our pedestrian signal pole, just to give you a visual aid of where that pole would be placed in relationship to the existing infrastructure and that existing landscape that is present in that corner. And that device in itself is approximately 8 inches in a square, but then that pole diameter is about 5 inches. So how did we come about with I guess the signal design, but also the idea of the always stop? So statewide, we have developed a list with regards to rebuilding traffic signals based on the longevity and the of their equipment, as well as, you know, where does it meet with today's standards and devices. So this location ranked in the top 10 for signals to be rebuilt. On the left-hand side, you can see the various rebuild issues with related to the equipment that exists today. And then how we then how we identified I guess the process that I'm going to kind of go over with regards to the always stop. So essentially, we would look at any location and we would determine kind of what is that best traffic control associated with that intersection due to crashes, crash history, volumes, and other data points that we've collected. So starting with the crash data, as part of the original study back in 2016 to 18, we noticed that there was three reported crashes, 2 of them being angle crashes one related to running the red light, and the other third crash involved a truck hitting a parked car. I was able to pull updated crash data from June 8th to May 3rd of this year. And we have 6 reported crashes in that general vicinity of the intersection. 2 of those crashes are related to our angle crashes. And again, they were due to left turning crashes. And then unfortunately, one was involving a pedestrian. The other 4 crashes involved parked vehicles or other vehicles striking a sign in the vicinity of the intersection. So the other data point or aspect that we collect is traffic volume data, and through the various historical conversations and interaction with the city, we've collected multiple traffic volume data efforts. One was collected in 2015, and the others were in the 2017 range due to just various conversations, again, to understand peak hour conditions, as well as summertime seasonal changes. The next few slides now kind of will dissect that information of the data that we've collected. So what you see on the screen today is really then our screen right now looks at that peak hour, that PM peak volume distribution and the changes over a 12-hour weekday count versus a 4-hour Friday, and then the Saturday condition as well, to understand if there's any blips or any concerns that we needed to highlight in or collect further and evaluate in regards to the always stop idea. The right-hand chart looks at, again, that compares that weekday volume for each of the approaches in relationship to a Saturday condition, which shows, you know, some changes, especially in the northbound direction, but some consistency or within a limit of consistency on the other approaches between the other, the weekday and the Saturday volumes. We also looked at, again, these charts now kind of dissect that peak hour, that AM, midday, PM condition in regards to each of those movements in comparison now to the calendar year that we collected, the 2015 and the 2017 data. Overall, the majority is consistent with what between the two calendar years. Yes, there's some fluctuation in the data or those time periods, which is normal with regards to the to various intersections over time. But again, there was trying to figure out if there was areas that we needed to focus in on with regards to the study and the data collection effort. So taking all those numbers into account, what we do is we then try to grade through just a normal A through F scale that is recognized nationally as to in terms of vehicular delay on that approach. So the charts on the left include the existing signal that's out there today. It's pretty consistent with a B grade. The delay that a vehicle would experience can range anywhere between the 12 to 13 seconds on the low end to your 17 second delay on a certain case, like a Friday PM peak condition. The right charts now compare what would happen if the intersect, based on that same volume information, what the operation and the delay of the always stop would be. And you could see in comparison as to what we've highlighted in green, that's what would be improved upon with regards to a vehicular delay. So that 12-second delay at the low end is now changing into an 8-second delay. And then your high end delay is still in your 17-second, and that's highlighted in that yellow condition with a C. And if you really compare those two numbers, the signal would operate in a B with a 17.5 second vehicular delay compared to the always stop that is projecting to have a 17.2 second delay. So very minimal change, but due to the national conditions of how things are graded, in theory, that would be a lower identifier. So besides the volumes and the various volume data that was collected, there is a national manual on uniform traffic control devices, or MUTCD, that Delaware has adopted as part of our regulations that looks at justification, or what we call warrants. And they take all that information that we evaluated to see, all right, if there was no control at this intersection, what would it be? What would be justified? And essentially that signal condition would not be warranted based on that data that was collected. So I do want to just point out in the next two slides, so with regards to that always stop idea, context sensitivity and driver expectation is a topic that we look at for all of our evaluations. So there is consistency from just a stopping condition, especially along 6th Street already, but throughout the city. And here there's 4 examples on this screen in regards to, in comparison to 6th Street and Delaware Street that have stopping conditions. as well as the next 4 that I've highlighted on this slide, that again, from a driver expectation, they visually are aware that stop signs are in the city. And so the presence and what that expectation of the driver, it's not an inconsistent application or idea that we're thinking about or what I'm talking about today. So really the conversation of, well, what would happen next with regards to that always stop idea. So the biggest thing to highlight is it's reversible. Always stops are a low cost installation removal application. From a time period perspective, it is minimal resources and applications that can be applied because it's primarily signage and striping for the most part. But in this case, it would just be changing that signal from the red, yellow, green configuration to a flashing red condition. And again, I do want to highlight that this is then highlighted through a test period that I'm going to touch on in the next slide. So the how to start the conversation or the idea of the always stop is working with you all and in looking at and obtaining documentation, agreeing upon this monitoring effort. That typical monitoring effort or that conversion period is what I've laid out over that between the 30 days prior to the 1 year after, but that can be changed and we can certainly work with whether it's a council or your city administrator on what that schedule would look like if it was decided to move forward with the pilot effort of the always stop. Essentially, we would take all that data that we previously collected and we would collect new data under the new traffic control condition with the always stop. We would observe that on the day that it was installed, we would observe time periods after it's installed. And then if there's various concerns that come up, I guess, and funneled through the city administrator or the council, we can certainly deploy troops to have that data observed and looked at to see if it quantitatively has an impact of that always stop. And then essentially we would then report back after that testing period, or if there's a point at any time during that testing period that we believe, again, the city believes that the signal should just be put back in, then we would do that. But we would look to try to monitor it as best we can over that schedule that is determined to really try to quantify it. So again, to proceed, we would just look for something from the council as to whether or not moving forward with this pilot and this always stop conversion is agreed upon, that we would work collaborative, especially with the city administrator, on what that timeline and checklist process would be. And then we would move forward with kind of implementing the devices, converting over the signal to the always stop, and then executing the necessary data collection effort afterwards. So with that, I can open it up for any questions associated with the idea.
Questions from council?
This is Councilman Smith. Going back to the installation that we're talking about with the traffic lights. I hear that one of the big issues is where the big box is going to go. Can the big box not be moved over to where Gebhardt's is? The funeral home?
So that's a feasible location. We can, and that was a part of the discussion with the field meeting that occurred a few weeks ago, and looking at the potential of relocating that box. So again, it's a part of our to-do list to look at the feasibility of moving that if we, as we are preparing the updated signal plan.
Okay, I guess when you folks first came to us long ago, it was clear that DelDOT wanted to save money and wanted our traffic light out of here and wanted to put stop signs in. So that does sort of hurt your credibility with whatever data you have. And the data that was first collected was collected during weekdays in the middle of the day. And we do have a problem with traffic coming through town, particularly in the summertime on Fridays. It's some Fridays when there's a backup on Route 13 or a backup on I-95. We're the main road north and south. And so 5 p.m. on a Friday, traffic is backed up from 6th and Ferry Cutoff halfway to Wilmington. And I'm not sure how that all figured into your data, but there's a stop sign there at 6th and Ferry Cutoff. And there is a backup there an awful lot of the time, and also at 6th and South. So we're adding another set of stop signs to a road where we already know we have backups on stop signs at certain times. Now, most of the year, the stop sign plan, it might be no problem. I know a lot of folks are concerned about that, but there are times, and I guess I can't argue with your data, but I can tell you what I see where we have serious backups in town, and I'm afraid the traffic signals or these stop signs will add to that backup on 6th Street. And if we do go with this experiment, I hope we have some reassurance that we still get to decide whether we want a traffic light or not.
Correct. So right now the signal project is slated for our fiscal year 22, which starts in July 1. So we've identified this project and we have it programmed for that fiscal year, which doesn't mean that we can't work through a pilot effort or develop a schedule initially, and that installation or that idea of a signal is still brought up in the future, say in the spring of 2022, when it would still be in our fiscal year program. So we still have it identified in our signal rebuild program list. It's just, again, at the request in talking with the city, it was presenting this information again, as well as providing an update on where we stand on that design. And again, visually showing, where these devices would go, because it is aesthetically, it will be a bigger change for that intersection because of the size of the equipment and the devices and the placement because of where compared to what is out there today.
Mm-hmm. Right.
President Smith here, or Platt here, Mr. Smith. It's built in the resolution. We have complete control of this entire project. The money will, like he said, will always be budgeted through DelDOT, but we have complete control of the project.
Okay. Well, how about, okay.
Any other questions?
Yes, Suzanne Souther. I walked down and looked at it when the chalk marks were there, and I guess it's the southwest corner, the one across from where the signal pole would be across from the funeral home. It looked to me like that was awfully close to the house and would not, by the time I came back another day to try to measure it, we had some rain and the chalk marks were gone. But I'm not, ADA requires a minimum of 32 inches for a short distance of clearance between the base of the pole and the house. And I'm not sure we have it. Is that something you checked?
So as part of our designs, we do a detailed measurement, and that was a big part of that visual, I guess, exercise that we did a few weeks ago in regards to that placement. Because we're going with a 2-pole design, in order to control the various movements, the placement is looked at with regards to how close it is to the existing properties, and those impacts, and what they may be. But we've looked at those clearances through the design process.
And I guess the data went by kind of fast and the print was kind of small. Is there any way you could send us your PowerPoint so that we'd be able to look at it in more detail?
Sure. I shared it with Kim right before I needed to present, but I'll make it again available to everybody.
So when I was out there taking a look at everything, there was a chalk marked area over by Gebhardt's, kind of right beneath their business sign. And it was circled on your presentation. So obviously, who gives on that, you know? But is there no way to make the footprint of this smaller? Because 21 by 21's big corner pole, you know, when you actually measure it out, that's a big old. It seems like there should be a way, and there may be time to design it, just something that still meets standards, but has a much smaller footprint for intersections like this. Like the current footprint, the current design is like overkill for the intersection, you know? It's overkill due to size and placement and everything. So there has to be a smaller footprint.
So we're already utilizing smaller, we're using a smaller cabinet than standard. And we're using, I guess, construction techniques where the base is actually at grade. So only the pole would be sticking essentially out of the sidewalk to minimize kind of those clearances and those impacts. But we're from a standards perspective, this is the kind of the bare bones application that we're providing. There may be, if we needed to, and I believe it was presented at previous councils in regards to a different pole design, but again, where it would only be a single pole at the intersection, but it would then impact probably a larger footprint in a corner versus kind of the 2-pole design that we're proposing with the kind of that smaller footprint. But all that is in order to get minimum height standards, structural integrity, because right now what's out there today is a span wire design. It's just a signal head with a wire across the roadway. That's an older design. That's not what we typically use today. And our applications now is a mast arm design, where it's a pole and then you have another steel beam across the roadway to, I guess, house all of our infrastructure.
Okay, one thing you just said and something else I want to clarify. You said it's typically not what you use, but is there an option to still use the current design that's there?
So I'll recant. It's not typical. Our standard today is mast arms.
Okay, and the one thing I do want to stress, because, you know, having gone out and talked to some folks on this, and, you know, the big question is, why can't we just leave our light there? It's not broke, you know, it doesn't need fixing. And they're right, it's not broken, it doesn't need fixing. But that is a state intersection. And at some point, either we go to stop signs or there will be a new light. That light will not. We have the option to leave the light, but you will then not maintain it at all. And
sorry to interrupt. So the existing light has infrastructure concerns. I mean, we do not have Opticom receivers. The signal cabinet is very, very old. And even the signal heads and some of the other conditions are really poor condition. So there could be, worst case scenario, we're talking a complete failure of the signal. And now it's a matter of what then gets implemented under that condition or that emergency scenario. That's what we're trying to prevent. And that's why this location was identified under our rebuild list. We're actively working on the design and we're actively looking at programming it to meet current design standards.
Would
Councilperson.
Sorry.
That's okay. Councilperson Day, being that you are involved in the fire service and you took a pretty good gander at this, measurements and all, I'd like to hear what you think.
I had a couple questions, actually. So, Peter, I guess a couple of things. Can you actually walk through how you determine the best placement for the equipment?
Sure.
For the poles and the box.
Okay, so a lot of it So to start, it's looking at available right away. So we're looking at where the placement is in regards to, the public right away of where we can place devices. From there, it's now looking at utility impacts, both underground and overhead, because we have standards associated with how close we can be to that equipment that exists, or that utility lines that exist. Next, we're now looking at from an electrical service as to where we can pull power from, based on the existing footprint today. And that's where we've looked at as part of that field review of trying to move that cabinet to another location, and what does that do from that service perspective and the various soup to nuts and connection aspects. Then you're looking at ADA aspects associated with how close we need those poles to be in regards to offsets from an ADA standard, so that if a pedestrian is utilizing the intersection, how close they, from a reach perspective, a geometric design, and things of that nature. And then we're looking at, okay, from a visual perspective of a vehicle now approaching that condition, or that stop, where is that placement of the signal heads, based on standards that are laid out in the various guidelines and regulations that we have for designing signal.
Understand. Thank you for that. And so, can you give us an example of another very similar signal, maybe in a similar setting that we could go and actually look at?
From a rebuild perspective?
Yes.
I can share one. I'll share it with the city administrator. I'll share a few of them, and then you can go and look at them as well.
Okay. And you had answered already the question between the mast type setup and then the wire, hanging them off the wire. But I do agree with Valerie. It does seem like the what's proposed there is very large for the intersection, and kind of obtrusive, to be honest with you. But I understand what you're saying, that DelDOT obviously has a revised standard. So the other thing I wanted to ask about was, so if we decided to go along with the study, how long, if we had a series of issues, how long would it take for reversal?
So it would be a matter of, I guess, depending upon the language of the resolution, I would first start with that as to, is it presenting information back to the council, or is it something that we're just working through coordination, say with the city administrator? But then we would work on having the staff available and scheduling that condition. Because again, we'd have to look at, okay, now removing that stop condition, converting that signal from the flash condition back to red, yellow, green. So there may be a little bit of time, but we would try to accommodate their request as soon as possible.
But you're talking like days or weeks, not months?
No.
Okay. So Valerie, to answer your question, so and I'm not speaking for Goodwill Fire Company, but from my experience, the fire departments want the opticoms. They want to be able to change the lights ahead of time so they can clear the intersections. But I do not know at this point what Goodwill's perspective is on that. But that is, one of the things that we look at with our equipment, and be able to clearing intersections, so we don't have to go down opposing lanes of traffic.
So our three options, if I remember correctly again, and that's what I was trying to say a while ago, is we leave it as it is, but when it dies, and it's the city's responsibility to maintain it. And when it dies, then we'll probably have to go to stop signs anyways until and then I'm not sure, I don't remember what would happen with that. Or we go to the lights directly, or we do the four-way stop with the flashing red to test that scenario to see how it would work. So, and I'm not sure if, Peter, I'm sure you have the answer. And if not, I'm sure Mr. Barthel remembers what, if we decide to leave the light as it is, what happens?
So, Bill, I don't mean to jump in on this.
Oh,
I mean,
please
from
do.
the department's perspective in regard to our ownership of the signal and the infrastructure, ethically, from an engineering perspective, we cannot leave that light as is. The options really are only the two, is continue to rebuild it or try to, or look at the pilot effort with still the option of rebuilding it if that pilot effort is deemed determined to be, I guess, at some level of unsuccessful.
Peter, Council President Platt here. I got a couple questions. One, the placements of the walk and do not walk signs are either close to the business or the residents. Those signs actually beep as they're counting down or whatever. Is that true?
So our APS,
Yes.
so our audible pedestrian signal, that's what has that visual or that sound condition. With regards to, because of the aid that it has for an accessible pedestrian. But we can confirm through the design with regards to what type of conditions are being applied from a pedestrian. They will get upgraded with countdown conditions to advise pedestrians when that don't walk or walk condition is going to expire. So those would be a part of all of our upgraded designs for the intersection. That
And
currently doesn't have them.
right. And they're also, like I said, one's right next to a porch. So people are going to hear that sitting on their porch talking every 3 minutes. I agree with the massive structures that are going to be on the corner, especially the corner Councilperson Souter brought up. That pole was sitting dead center of the sidewalk on 6th Street, which doesn't even look like it's safe. It doesn't even look like it's safety. I don't know the 80 or if it's in compliance. But can you go over some intersections that you've replaced over the years with some crash data?
Sure.
I mean, everybody's concerned about safety issues, and I know of two that were put in about the same time we were discussing ours back in 2018. I'm just kind of curious, when you put a light in, or when you take a light out and put a four-way stop in, what's the change in safety?
That's a great point, Council President. So I'm glad you brought up that question. So two of probably our recent conversions, one was in Middletown, Route 71, Broad Street, and Lake Street. We, through the working with the town of Middletown, we actually completely removed the signal and we implemented a two-way stop condition, not an all-way. So motorists previously would have had that signal at the intersection, and now only side street traffic on Lake Street would be stopping. From time to time, we receive just random concerns with regards to it, but we work hand in hand with the town of Middletown and their planning commission, and as well as their police chief and their police department in regards to the concerns, to see, okay, what other kind of countermeasures we can apply, whether it's because it's a two-way stop condition, it's definitely different than this application. So there's other ideas that we can utilize in our toolbox, like time of day restrictions, other types of enforcement initiatives. But again, that signal location is not off the table with the town of Middletown, especially as the town grows, new connections are being built. We've engaged with them through numerous conversations on that intersection and improvements that could go on later on in the future. One that's probably a little bit closer to what we're proposing, or what could go here, is at Newport and Kyemensi, right near outside of Delcastle High School. That was a complete signal. We implemented an all-way stop at that location. We worked hand in hand with the area legislators as well as the school district specifically, again, to understand initially what type of data concerns they had, because they had a turnover of nighttime opportunities in schooling, and as well as various events like football or other sport activities that they were concerned with. So it was collecting that information initially to then compare it through the pilot effort as to what operations could go on at that location. To date, I'm unaware of a concern at that always stop that was implemented, specifically at the Newport and Kyemensi intersection.
Well, I'm looking on the map here and Newport and Kyaminci is one, it's a T intersection.
The
Would that
three-way.
change? It's a three.
Correct.
Yeah.
It is a three-way.
So I would suspect that some of that data would not be, I don't know. It's,
So
yeah,
Let me finish with my questioning.
sorry, I just had to
Um,
look at what it was.
With the traffic light, and this was brought up to you, somebody lives on that intersection. With the traffic light, when people go to make a left-hand turn, the cars behind that car, the signal, they're waiting for the next signal, basically, if in heavy traffic, correct?
Yeah, so if, so as part of the redesign, we would do an updated timesheet associated with the intersection. But you're correct, if the one approach is, if the two approaches are green simultaneously, which happens today, and that first vehicle is waiting to turn left, then everybody behind them are now queued up and waiting before that left turning vehicle turns. Unless granted, there's room to bypass that individual.
Correct. And it also, it's going to actually help the flow of traffic, if I'm not correct, because I go down there and I've been watching this quite a bit. When you go down there and you watch, a lot of times there's cars on 6th Street just sitting north and southbound, just sitting waiting for the light to change, and nowhere on Delaware Street. So if there's no cars on Delaware Street, the traffic is going to be continuously flowing, so to say. Once they stop, they continue through.
Correct. As long as, rules of the road still apply at the stop condition.
Right.
But that's what we're projecting and that's where it goes into that grading, that A through F condition is based on, simulation models and acceptable software that's associated with measuring how that intersection would operate. We're showing better stopping delays associated with the always stop versus the signal.
Any other questions?
Mr. Platt, if you don't mind.
Mr. Mayor?
Peter, Jen Cohen's a friend of mine, always had a lot of style. Notwithstanding all the stereotypes about your profession, I know you got a lot of style. 300 stoplights in the United States. Thank you, Google, for that. Is this the best we got? I mean, there's no other aesthetic that looks better than these things. These things look so clunky and so big and industrial. I mean, historic areas, Boston, major urban areas. I mean, seriously, I'm asking from a part of this is they're just massive and they're just butt ass ugly. Is there any other options?
So, and Mr. Mayor, I just want to make sure you're talking about the signal design, correct?
Yeah, just the poles, the stanchions, the whole thing. I mean, I kind of wish we'd have kind of the old style, the single pole with the the light up on top, because it just looked better. I mean, this is not this is not 13 and 273. This is 6th and Delaware streets. I'm just trying to see if there's any other options that, are frankly have a better aesthetic.
So we are applying aesthetics with the signal design. We're looking at decorative poles associated so that they would be black instead of our gray steel that exists on 273 and 141. So and then we're also looking at a black color cabinet as well, again, to kind of mesh with that aesthetics with the signal pole.
I don't think it's the color.
No, it's the size.
It's the size. So I see what Mr. Mayor is saying is that what are they using in downtown Boston where they've, a historic area? What do their traffic signals look like? What does it look like in Annapolis? What does it look like somewhere else? It's the size. It's just, it's a 2-lane road, one in each direction. And these are massive, massive. And even though you're saying you're applying the aesthetic, there has to be, they're just somewhere in the United States, there has to be smaller. And if not, then maybe you can become rich by designing.
Councilman
So-
Platt here. I've seen a lot of this. I don't know if this is a national product or a project, because you can go to Pennsylvania, you can go to Philly, and we've got the best they got right now. That's why we're paying the extra $20,000 for that. We've got the best they've got.
And so again, going into from a regulation perspective, I touched on the METCD in the presentation. There's standards associated with how many signals we have to have based on the approach, the placement of those signals in regards to the distance to the stop bar, the height of those signals in relationship to from the surface of the roadway. When you start accounting for all of those various devices that then are placed on our equipment, that's where you're now accounting for the weight and to that mast arm design and that pole to now support those things, because we're having a pole in one corner that has two mast arms essentially stretched out over, say, 6th Street and Delaware, to now house and hold all of our equipment aerially. I believe a good location, just kind of spitballing, is downtown Smyrna at 300 or Route 6. There might be a good example of kind of a layout that was done a few years ago, again, with the aesthetic poles and the mast arm design. But again, going back to Mr. Day's question, we can certainly come up with a variety of locations that kind of fit this location and what has that design already in place.
And Peter, my last question was going to be, just to make it clear, this is still budgeted for next year, this year. And if the four-way does not work, we go back to the design of putting overhead lights.
Correct. We have already identified the location on our FY22 list, and that we would start that process essentially this month with our federal partners, because we're utilizing federal dollars to fund this project, the signal design. So it is identified for FY22.
Okay. Mayor, anything else?
Mr. President, if the chief of police is still on, could he comment? I think he did in a previous meeting, but I wasn't privy to that. So I'd just like to hear what he has to say.
Oh, I was hoping to avoid that. You
I
found
was
me.
trying, Chief.
Well, first of all, now I know who to blame for my left-hand turn from Lake Street to Broad Street. I can't stand that turn. Here's what I know. I was just appointed chief when this conversation was coming to an end. So I do remember suggesting that I still to this day, I have great concern that a stop sign will cause traffic at peak hours to back up. These residents have to tolerate a lot. This has become a throughway. It is a nightmare. It is a nightmare to navigate through this city as it stands now. I can't imagine that it would get better with a four-way stop. I don't have I'm not a traffic engineer, so I don't mean to compete with, your knowledge, but my local knowledge tells me that if people get frustrated to get through the city, they're going to do what they're already doing, and 3rd Street volume is going to increase. And we have a problem already on 3rd Street with volume. So I have concerns. I can't imagine that if you don't let traffic flow, and quite honestly, at this point, we should be figuring out a way to let it flow longer when we're at these peak times. So that's my that's my concern with that. As far as a safety perspective, there's no data to support whether a four-way stop or a traffic light, from my perspective, is any worse. I've published all the crash data we've had over the last few years. And like I've said publicly 100 times, most of these crashes are distracted driving, and stuff like that. We don't have a ton of intersection crashes. The other concern, and it was brought up earlier, it's a legitimate concern. And I didn't cover this with the quality of life issues that we dealt with last month, but 3 of them were road rage incidents, where people either implied or displayed weapons, right? So yes, four-way stops cause people to get frustrated, especially with a lot of volume like that. So I have concerns over that. It may not be a constant, steady issue There may be times that, you know, that would be effective. It's for the moments that we're dealing with the mass exodus from Wilmington to wherever they live south of Newcastle, because they don't want to take 13, they don't want to take 95. So that's my take.
Peter, you know, just one last thing, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with, you know, we've talked to Will Mapco about, you know, and you guys, we've got, you know, the conversations with the railroad division going on about the railroad crossing at Ferry Cutoff and 8th Street. You know, there was conversation some time ago about, you know, not making 6th Street a through street if you were to redesign, you know, the absolute disaster that Ferry Cutoff is, as it, you know, moves from, you know, in front of Rivertown Plaza and heads out to where the police station is, or Mr. Platt's neighborhood in Van Dyke Village, that turn that it makes, which is just, I mean, you couldn't design that entire stretch from the crossing of the railroad tracks to that next corner in any way worse than it ever was created. So, you know, it'd be nice to make Ferry Cutoff a real cutoff and, you know, kind of take all the traffic off of 6th, because as the chief just articulated, 6th Street, 3rd Street, several of our downtown streets become just, you know, places where people go to escape other traffic bottlenecks. And it'd be great if, you know, if 6th Street ever was cut off by the school and was not a through street any longer, that'd be a game changer. We'd be talking probably a stop sign.
The only way that's gonna happen is if we build a bridge over the town.
One more question. Is DelDOT aware that it's working in a National Historic Landmark District?
It was discussed as part of through the design process.
Okay. Because we are talking federal dollars.
Correct.
Okay.
I think there's other information that Peter was gonna get to us via Kim. I think we don't have to make a decision on this tonight. And I'd like to see the information and the try to make it out to some of these other intersections. I went before, but I don't know. Maybe I just wasn't looking at it right. So I don't know what everyone else thinks, but.
We have a resolution on table.
I'm not sure we do. Hasn't been read yet, has it?
That's what I'm asking you. Do we read it or not?
Suzanne, did you ask for more, the presentation being made available to us?
I did, because I mean, I frankly couldn't read all those details when it was going by and the print was too small. But I mean, how much longer do we have to make a decision, Peter?
Well, so we're actively already doing the signal design. So really it's a matter, like, our plan is continuing to support the 2018 resolution that was executed about implementing the new signal. So until kind of the next resolution is passed, like, that's still our game plan for the location. But I will certainly follow up with the presentation through Kim, as well as some example locations that we talked about.
So Peter, if we delayed any reading of a resolution or anything by another month or so, that's not going to affect what you're doing, or it wouldn't throw a huge cog in the wheel?
Correct, it would not, because again, our fiscal year starts July 1. So that would be the game plan, is trying to wrap up the design this current fiscal year, for a little bit into the new fiscal year on that signal, so that we can start the handoff process for our construction staff to implement.
What do other council members think of moving this to June?
Well, I would agree that we should move it to June. It doesn't matter to me if we read it and put it on the, and then table the ordinance until June, or if we, or if proper procedure is just not to read it.
Mr.
We can
Lawson,
table it. And that's, if we read it, we're gonna take a vote on it.
is that the
I
case?
think a motion to table is always in order.
Right.
All right, let's make a motion to table for June. Further review of other information that we'll get. That's my motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the motion's tabled. Next is discussion of council discussion of underground utility update. First, would you like to bring us up to date on that?
Yes, Mr. Platt, I pretty much did in my opening remarks, which was that Delmarva's not going, at least from what I've been told, what I was told yesterday was that the earliest at this point that they're projecting to start this project would be sometime in the fall, but potentially not until next spring of 2022. I know that there had been discussion at the last MSC meeting concerning what they wanted to do in regards to helping to fund their portion of this project. And my recollect is that they basically tabled it, that the mayor had, I think the mayor had made some opening comments at that meeting. And after those comments, the discussion was limited, and for all intents and purposes, it went nowhere.
So MSC basically pulled their funds by tabling it for
They didn't,
the present.
no, they didn't discuss the funds. They didn't discuss, they just discussed it very generally and very briefly that the potential for a rate increase, and it was stated by one of the commissioners that it was of his opinion that that he wasn't in favor of a rate increase to fund this particular project. Then they stopped. There was no discussion, if I recall, about the cost, the 30, they didn't really roll up their sleeves and talk too extensively about it. And so in my opinion, the whole discussion was kind of tabled. That's where we are with it.
Questions from council?
Yeah, since it's been delayed, I think we can wait if we could see what, I think we can wait a little bit on this. Because we don't have information to really move on anyways, if MSC isn't doing anything, and they're delaying it by 4 or 5 months, 6 months, possibly almost a year. So.
Okay, lastly, we have regarding pavement and striping of parking on spaces on East Third Street between Chestnut and Harmony.
Yeah,
Ms. Cleary, you put this up if you'd like to enlighten us.
Sure. So, concerns by Mr. Miller about parking on Third Street have been brought to us before. One of the concerns being that, multi-residential housing has more than, one car, obviously. My thing was, we're not going to widen that street, and we're not going to take away the current residential housing, multi-residential housing that's there. That's there. The idea then was thought, well, that parking might be an issue. And I know that we will all agree sometimes that people don't know how to park. They may take up too much space and leave very little or whatever. So the idea was like, would striping help or not? So I have asked Mr. Barthel and Mr. Bergstrom to figure that out. What do we have? What would you gain in striping or lose in striping, and what facts and figures are behind it? Mr. Barthel, Mr. Bergstrom.
Jeff, you want to talk about the information that Kim's pulling up?
Sure, yes. The short answer is it's going to be quite painful to put tick marks on and delineate parking along the street. Right now, you can just see from the little chart, we have, if we started delineating parking spaces and gave them 22-foot space like the engineers recommend for a road that narrow. Because the narrower the road, the longer the parking space has to be. Pretty much the state says 21 feet, 22 feet is kind of the average. If we just pick 22 and figured people might get out of there, you can see between Delaware and Harmony Street on the even side, we got 23 spaces and 22 on the odd side. Between Harmony and Chestnut, we've got 29 spaces that would theoretically fit there and 29 on the odd side, rather uniquely. So the total spaces are 45 and 58. If we subtracted a couple spaces each side, which is just my approximation of how many spaces we lose, because when you put parking spaces, when you delineate parking space, you create a parking utility and you will follow ADA guidelines. So we're there at 43 and 56 spaces. Daytime averages on the streets right now are, 18 or 20 cars in the unit in the first block and 35 to 37 in the block between Harmony and Chestnut. If we look at how many cars actually park there, and that's pretty much approximates an 18-foot space, we've got 57 cars in the first block and 70 in the second block. That's a heck of a hit to take. And it'll be expensive to make ADA compliant parking spaces, and we will have to do it. There's just no two ways, just by putting tick marks on the road. So
and again, just to reiterate, because the street is so narrow, the parking spot has to be longer. So
right, it's only 8 foot. It's only 24 feet of road.
Right.
Minimum parking spaces are supposed to be 9 feet, maybe 8.5 you can get by with, which would leave a 7-foot travel lane. That's bumper cars.
Right. So what we're clearly seeing here on this chart, 45 in the first block and then 58 if you actually striped it, versus kind of the open parking of 57 and 70. So that is really, really a lot. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. I had several people contact me about the parking, and one of them says, I have a van and I have a Mini, and if you stripe the street, you're going to lose, and she pointed this out, you're going to lose some because my van takes up X and my Mini takes up X, and now you're using 2 full spots where you might have actually had 3 or something. And there were a couple other people, Linda Susky and Allison Burrow, who sent commentary. These things are in your folder, and they were definitely not in favor of striping the street. But I think the overall loss of parking, period, kind of negates the striping at all. I had no idea it had to be 22 feet. So I was thinking it was more like 10 feet or something. I was guessing, but so I don't really see a reason. The loss of parking spots is really just too many to pursue any kind of striping on the streets, and along with the ADA stuff we would have to do. So does anyone have any questions? No. Okay, thank you.
New adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Excuse me a second, Mr. President. Don't you want to adjourn to your executive session?
Oh, yeah.
Motion to adjourn to executive session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I'm going to end the meeting and then just log back in
Okay.
using the same information.
Thank you.